Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Megan. Today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in April and in May. And if you can hear screaming and giggling in the background, my kids are being crazy in their room right now for quiet time. They don't really understand the quiet portion of quiet time, but they're in there playing. It's whatever. So sorry if you can hear that. But I know I'm a little bit late to be recapping April and May because we're already in like the second week of June, but better late than never. And let's just get right into it. So, I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in April and May, like I said, and then at the end of the video, I will talk about where these books fit into the different challenges that I'm trying to work my way through. But starting off with April, the first book that I finished was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, and I listened to this book on audio. Um, and if you're not familiar with this book, it was very popular when it came out. It won the Pulitzer Prize. When did it come out? It came out in 2019, so I'm a little bit late to this book, but I really, really enjoyed it. The writing was absolutely fantastic. I would love to read more of this author's work. I know that he has a lot of books that are very beloved by many. Um, and I think if I read another one of his books, I would read it in print to really appreciate the prose that he has because I feel like sometimes that can get a little bit lost with an audio. That being said, the audiobook production was really well done. The narrator was really great. And I really appreciate a fiction book that deals with real world topics and history. So, if you're unfamiliar with what this book is about, it is set in the 1960s, so like Jim Crow era, turning to the civil rights movement in America, where a young boy, our main character Elwood, is sent to a reform school in Florida, I think, in Tallahassee, I believe, somewhere in Florida, but it's based off of a real life reform school from the time as well that affected, I mean, like hundreds of lives of young Black men and the cruelty that they suffered there and the injustice that they faced. And so, this is really a fictionalized story of what that experience would have been like. With our main character Elwood and some friendships that he makes at the school, and we just kind of go through that journey. And it's extremely heavy, as you can probably imagine, the abuse that was suffered, and even it being fiction, knowing that it's based off of real life events. It's really heartbreaking, but I think important to shed light on this topic that I really didn't know anything about going into this book. So, again, I know there's some other books out there that take this concept and do something with it in a fictional way. And I know that his other books deal with a lot of other like racial injustice issues in America. So it's a topic that I would really like to continue exploring with my fiction reads. So if you have any suggestions on what Colson Whitehead book I should go to next, let me know because I would love to read more of his backlist. But yeah, this book was really, really fantastic and I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read more of his books. The next book that I finished was Stay With Me, and please forgive my pronunciation of this name, Ayobami Adébáyọ. I will put it up on screen, obviously, but I am unsure how to pronounce the author's name. I checked this out from the library. I just found it while browsing the shelves at the library. It was a book that I had never heard of. After I checked it out, I realized it was listed for the Women's Prize for Fiction for the year that it came out, which makes a lot of sense after reading it. It feels very in that vein of books that are chosen for that prize. But this book, in case you don't know what it's about, essentially follows a couple in Nigeria. I think it's set in the 80s mainly. And you kind of get a side by side narrative of this couple and the political events of Nigeria of the day. And so, the husband and wife, when they first get together, she tells him, I am not into polygamy. I am not going to be your first wife. I'm going to be your only wife. Like, I do not want you to take multiple wives, because that was the norm and very much the expectation in the culture. She says she wants nothing to do with that, and he agrees. And they love each other and they have a great marriage until a couple years down the road, they are struggling with conceiving a child. There is fertility struggles within their marriage, and so the pressure is really mounting on the husband from his family to take another wife to give him a baby, and an heir, all of that, a legacy. And it really kind of, like, the fertility struggles plus the polygamy, like, these issues obviously create quite a rift in their marriage. And so we're following that storyline of their marriage going through these things, plus the like political upheaval of Nigeria at the time. And then, yeah, you're just really following their life and how that all culminates to the end. And I will say, this book is not what I expected going into it. I mean, I didn't have any knowledge of it. I just knew what was on the synopsis on the back of the book when I checked it out from the library. But even from that, I feel like I got so much more out of it than I expected. And it really took me by surprise in a really great way. I loved the writing style, I loved the storyline. It was really, really emotional. And I feel that I would have gotten even more out of it if I was more familiar with Nigerian politics, which I'm not, unfortunately. But I thought that the author, even with my ignorance, I could see that the author was doing a really great job kind of mirroring the political landscape with their marriage. And like, it was just really interesting to see like how the events that they were living through were kind of at play within their marriage as well. So I thought that was a really interesting way to go about this story and this narrative. And I would definitely be interested in reading more from this author. Like I said, I loved the writing style. I ended up giving Stay With Me 3.5 stars. And I don't think I said this earlier. If I didn't, I'm saying it now. I also gave The Nickel Boys 3.5 stars. So again, another book that I really, really enjoyed my time with. I would be really interested in reading more from this author. And yeah, I'm really glad I picked it up at the library, not knowing anything about it. I was very pleasantly surprised. Okay, I want to talk about the last two books that I finished in April, and also jump ahead and include one book that I finished in May, because I finished the last three books of the Emma M. Lyon series, the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. So I finished volume 6, 7, and 8 over the last 2 months. And that makes me completely caught up with what is currently published. She is working on volume 9, but it is not out yet, sadly. Um, I have talked about this series on this channel already. I love these books. I obviously can't say much about these books in particular because they are later in the series, so there would be spoilers for, the earlier parts of the series, but I continue to be so charmed by this series, by the characters, by the town. It feels nostalgic to read it, even though it's new to me. Like, it feels comforting. It feels like, I don't know. I just really, really love being in Emma's head and being in her journals. I love that the author chose to tell this story through like an epistolary format, through the journals of Emma. I love all of the friendships that she is making. I love, the wacky, quirky townspeople. I've seen people compare the town itself to the town in Gilmore Girls, like just where the town itself is like a character and all of the people that live there are like just really fun little side characters that pop in that all have silly, quirky personalities. But Emma, the heart of the story, Emma, I love her as a main character. I love her point of view. I love her growth. I love her friendships. With everyone in the book. There is a particular core friend group that she creates for herself. And it's just so sweet and such a beautiful, like, heart to the story. There's, a couple different ways she could go with choosing a romantic lead. You're not really sure where she's going to end up. And it's like one of those rare times when I would be genuinely thrilled to see her end up with any of the choices that are being presented. I have my opinions and my preferences, of course, which I won't say. Again, I don't want to spoil things, but I just really love this series, and I really implore you to pick this series up if it sounds interesting to you. I think the audiobooks are fantastic. The narrator does such an amazing job with all of the different voices. She's really truly been a great narrator for this series and really brings the book to life, I think, in a really special way. So again, if you haven't picked up this series, I really encourage you to do so. It's just taken my whole heart. Like, I love it so much. I gave volume 6 3.5 stars, volume 7 4.5 stars, and I gave volume 8 4.5 stars. 7 and 8 have been my favorites in the series so far, I believe. So again, I encourage you to read this series. I love it so much. So for May, the first book that I finished was The Dream Hotel, which I did talk about pretty in depth in a vlog that I did last month. So if you want more complete thoughts, you can also check that out. I talk about my final thoughts on the book at the end of that vlog. But if you're unfamiliar with this book, essentially our main character, Sarah, is detained for her risk assessment score becoming too high. And in this, it's like a near future dystopian sci fi type of novel. Basically, a risk assessment score is somewhat like a credit score, but they are using like any information they can pull about you, security cam footage, stuff that you post online, traffic tickets, any, like literally any information they are pulling, and an AI is evaluating this information and giving you, sorry, my kids are being crazy, are giving you a score based on how likely you are to commit a crime in the future. So hence risk assessment score. And there is also a technology in this world where you can get like a chip implanted that allows you to get better sleep in a smaller amount of time. And she is a new mom to twin babies, so she does opt into this. And the fine print, the terms and conditions are that this company can sell your data from your dreams, and that information can get mined to also be included in your risk assessment score. And so she is coming back home from a trip, and she gets detained at the airport because apparently she has recently been having some dreams where she is harming, or her husband is coming to harm. And that causes her risk assessment score to go above the legal limit. And she is put in a detention center, which is not run by the government. It's like run by a private, like third party, whatever, corporation. And the idea behind this center is you spend 21 days there, your score comes down, you're reformed, you get out. But once you get in, she realizes like how much the system is working against these women. And she's in this place with a bunch of women in the same type of situation as her. The rules are kind of shifting and changing. They're getting written up for things um, that are kind of getting like blown out of proportion and causing their time to continue to be extended and extended and extended. So you're going through her time at this detention center. A new woman comes in and kind of changes the trajectory of what Sarah decides to do about this like injustice that she's facing. And it just kind of goes from there. So like I said, the world building and the premise really hit for me. It was almost spooky with how like all of this is real. I mean, this could happen tomorrow. The things that are being explained in this book were so like it's so close to real life already. It just makes it feel so scary and creepy in like that way. But the premise and the writing style I loved. I loved her writing style. I liked that it was kind of a slower paced dystopian and a more meditative like pace than other dystopians I've read that are very like, quickly, things are happening very quickly, or like big things are happening. I don't know. I enjoyed that aspect of it, but I feel like, and I talked about this in my vlog, I feel like the ending, I I feel like there were, I'm trying not to spoil it. I feel like there were some big things that the author brought up within the story that she just like forgot about, and it never like got wrapped up well. Um, and that's, I feel like that's about all I can say without spoiling some plot points. But even with that being said, and even with the ending not quite matching my expectation of the book, I still really enjoyed my time with it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I really loved the concept, and I just felt disappointed by the end. I feel like the author could have done a lot more with what she set out with. It almost felt like she wrote the first half and then rushed to finish it or something. I don't know. I don't know. That's just me. That's just my like, I just expected more. The setup and everything, I just expected more and to feel more happy about the ending than I did. So it was just a little bit disappointing. It fell flat, but overall, I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the concept quite a lot. All right, the next book that I finished in May was an audiobook called Nobody's Girl, and this is a memoir from a survivor of Epstein and Maxwell, Virginia Roberts Giuffre. And I don't really want to say too much about this book. It's extremely heavy, as you can probably imagine. There were many parts of this book that genuinely made me nauseous. It was hard to stomach, particularly her stories of her childhood and the things that happened to her as a young girl. It's just so tragic. It's such a tragic story. She was incredibly brave and resilient, and really fought for justice to be served for other survivors of Epstein's circle. And she just had a hard life from beginning to end. And genuinely, this book, like it's hard for me to like fathom that there can be such evil in this world. And like I'm getting like I feel sick thinking about some of the things that happen in this book. So I honestly don't know if I would necessarily recommend this book because it is extremely difficult to read, but I do feel like it's something that's important to acknowledge as well. And her story, if you don't know, she did die by suicide right before this book was actually published. And so, just to like honor her life and her work, I felt it was important to get through the whole book as hard as it was. And yeah, I am not going to rate it. I don't really care to rate memoirs or really nonfiction in general, but I would recommend, if you feel like you can stomach it, I would recommend it. I think it's an important book to understand what happened to her in particular and to other girls like her. I don't really have much else to say about it, but I did read this book, so I wanted to mention it. But yeah, that was Nobody's Girl by Virginia Roberts Giuffre. All right, next up, on a much lighter note, in May, I finished The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. And I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. This was for a book club, and it ended up being a really fun book club book. I felt like we got a lot of really fun and interesting discussion out of it. If you're unfamiliar with this book, basically the premise is Lauren, our main character, she's a single woman in her 30s. She gets home from a bachelorette party, or a Hindu as they call it in Britain. But she gets home, and her house looks different, and there's a man in her home, and she's never met him before, but he claims to be her husband. And then she starts to look through pictures of her phone and realizes, oh, I have wedding photos, I have like a whole life with him, I don't even know this man. She freaks out, obviously. He ends up going into the attic to like change a light bulb or something, and out comes a different man, and her whole life changes around her once again. She has new pictures on her phone from a past with this man, her decor in her house changes, and it goes from there. She realizes that her attic is producing an endless supply of husbands for her. And so we kind of go through that situation. So, as you can probably imagine, this is just a really fun book. It was really funny, it was really interesting. I It's being made into an Apple TV show, and I think it will do really well as a show. Like the premise of it, the concept, I feel like would do really well for TV. But it was really entertaining and it was really interesting. I feel like it had, some good stuff to say about like the current dating culture and like how to choose someone when you have like virtually endless options, and just thinking about like what love is it, you know a certain feeling, is it a choice, is it a combination? I just had some interesting things to say in that regard, but ultimately it was really entertaining. I had a lot of fun reading it. I had a lot of fun discussing it with my book club. I gave it 3.5 stars, mostly just for being a really fun ride. All right, next up, I read Dominion by Addie Citchens. I read this via audio in an attempt to work my way through the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist, which the winner was just announced today as I'm recording this. And I have already read the book that won, The Correspondent. I read that earlier this year, but I read Dominion and I liked it. Okay. It was okay. I gave it 2.5 stars. I listened to it on audio, like I said. One of my very favorite audiobook narrators narrates one of the characters' point of view in this book. I can't remember her name, but I'll put it on screen. The narrator that I'm talking about, Bonnie Turpin. That's what her name is. Anyways, it's not quite what I expected. It is set in a town in Mississippi surrounding the family of a prominent Black pastor and his family. His youngest son, I think they have 5 sons total, 4 or 5, but his youngest son, Emmanuel, aka Manny, aka Wonder Boy, he is maybe like a senior in high school, an older high school boy. And the book is told from the perspective of his mother, so the pastor's wife, the first lady, and his current girlfriend, Diamond. This is marketed as a Southern family drama, and it definitely delivers in that department. That is what it is for sure. There are some really crazy things that happen in this book. I enjoyed it. I feel like it had some interesting things to say about how um, that certain type of privilege of being a prominent religious figure in a community can like affect your family and your mindset. But I feel like it could have done more. It could have pushed that more. There was one really big thing that happened in this book that just was like never addressed again. Um yeah, it's one of those few instances where I feel like the book could have actually been longer and gone a little bit more into depth in some of the events that happened. The ending was interesting. I feel like when I see people review it, that is what is most often commented on, is how they felt about the very end, which obviously I'm not going to say because I don't want to spoil it. And the ending was crazy. The ending was kind of crazy. I'm still not sure if I like the ending or not, to be quite honest. I ended up just feeling kind of meh about the whole book. Um yeah, I expected more from it than what I got, I think ultimately. So yeah, I gave it 2.5 stars, but I can definitely see why it made the shortlist for Women's Prize for Fiction. I can definitely see why a lot of people really loved this book. But for me, it just didn't quite hit the way that I wanted it to, unfortunately. All right, the last book that I finished in May is quite the buzzy book right now, and that is Yesteryear by Caro Burke. This book is everywhere on social media right now. I feel like, and maybe it's just my algorithm because I read the book, but I feel like I'm seeing everyone's thoughts and opinions on this book, and it's very polarizing. I see people really like critiquing and criticizing this book and the author, and I see people really defending and loving this book as well. I finished it before, like, I was specifically trying to ignore the chatter online about it until I got through the book. And I'm glad that I did that because I feel like some of the really um, loud opinions being expressed online would have colored my opinion reading the book on my own. And I really loved this book. I found it incredibly gripping, an incredibly enjoyable read with an incredibly unlikable character. Oh my gosh, the main character is absolutely insufferable. Obviously, she's meant to be, like that is the author's intention. Um, but I this book read like a thriller to me, and I think it's even classified as a thriller genre or maybe just literary fiction. I don't know, but it read really thriller like, very fast paced, very page turning. I feel like I read it really quickly through this book once I got into the story. I loved the writing style. I loved the structure. I feel like the book had a lot to say without like totally slapping you in the face with it, but also obviously it's very open to interpretation because there are such wildly different opinions and takeaways on this book. So, I mean, that says something about it, whether you love it or hate it. But yeah, for me personally, I really loved the book. And I'm actually thinking of doing like a full, like, with spoilers review on the book just to add my voice into the hundreds, thousands of voices out there talking about this book and their opinion on it. But you can see, like, I had thoughts. I had thoughts on this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm pretty sure this is her debut, and I would be very interested to see what she comes out with next. And I'm very glad that I picked this up and read it. I found it to be very enjoyable. If you're on the fence about it because you're seeing like a lot of hate for it or a lot of like big opinions about it, I would say just go for it because if anything, it's really entertaining to me at least. I found it to be incredibly entertaining, incredibly readable. But yeah, that maybe I'll do a full like thoughts and opinions review on it, like I said, because it's very buzzy right now. It's very buzzy, and I do have a lot of thoughts on it that I don't want to get too much into because I don't want to spoil it, like I said. But I do recommend reading it. I think it was really, really good. Really quickly, editing Megan here. Um, in my haste to talk about how much I enjoyed Yesteryear, I did not say anything about what this book is about. So, in case you don't know or haven't heard of this book, um, the premise of it is our main character, Natalie, is a trad wife influencer. So, like, think Nora Smith, Ballerina Farm, that type of thing. And she has a huge following online. She's built this brand around being a traditional wife, taking care of her children, living on a ranch with her husband, who is this very manly man, and takes care of the cattle and the crops and all that stuff. And behind the scenes, she is not so put together. She gets put back into time, into the 1850s, and learns what it is like to actually walk the walk, um, to actually live the lifestyle that she is promoting an aesthetic, idealized version of. And there's some twists and there's some things that happen, and the bulk of the book is told from this point of view of her living in the past, and then also like kind of how she became this online Natalie version of herself. Um, so that's just the basic premise of the book in case you've not heard of this book. So sorry that I forgot to mention that in the video, but there you go. All right, so really quickly, I want to talk about where all of these books fit into the various challenges that I'm trying to complete. First up, The Nickel Boys, the first book that I talked about. I read for the Read Good Challenge for Ben Reads Good for March, so I was a little bit late on it. But March prompt was to read a book that has been turned into an Oscar-nominated film. So I still need to watch the movie. I would really like to watch the movie soon, but that was the book that I used for that prompt. And then I know that I have talked about this on this channel that I'm trying to do the Read Good Challenge and the TBR Spin Challenge from Freshly Read Books. And I am so behind on both of those. March was the last one. No, actually, just kidding. Another book I read in April counted for Read Good. Stay With Me. I counted it for the April prompt was Read a Women's Prize nominated book, and it was nominated. I just forgot to write it down in my notes for some reason. But I'm looking also at Storygraph and it's telling me that I marked it for that. So I'm caught up through to April for the Read Good Challenge. I have not done May, which is read a book published before the year 2000. And June is Reading Shame Forgiveness Month, which I am working on a whole vlog for that right now. But anyways, that's where I stand with the Read Good Challenge as of now. I read for March and April, both of those books in April. I hope that makes sense. My brain was very scattered for that update. But anyways, back to what I was saying. I'm also trying to do the TBR Spin Challenge for freshly read books, and I think the last book that I completed for that challenge was February's book. So obviously I am extremely behind on that challenge. In all of April and May, I did not read one book for TBR Spin. I don't know why, but every time I think about doing a book for that challenge, the thought of picking up the book that fits whatever prompt I'm looking for, it just I feel like if I read that book, it's going to put me in a slump. I don't know why. I don't know why, because it's all books that I picked from my TBR. But I think I'm just too much of a mood reader, and I was just really trying to force myself to start one, and I didn't want to, and so I just ended up not. And now I'm just so far behind that I don't have the motivation to catch up, but we'll see if I do jump back into it. I know that it's just for fun. There's no reason to put pressure on myself. So I might just, when she spins for the next month, just go with that and just start from there with what I have left on my list. I don't know. I'll keep you updated, obviously, but for now, I don't have any updates for that challenge. I have not read another book for that challenge in the last couple months. So, but anyways, I do have some updates for my big reading challenge that I'm doing, which, if you're unfamiliar, you can watch my very first video that I posted where I talk about this reading challenge that I'm doing for myself. And for this challenge, if you remember, I can only count physically read books towards this challenge. So physical books or ebooks only, no audiobooks. So I do have a couple of additions for this challenge. First, we have Stay With Me will go towards my name, spelling out my name for S, and then also for set in non-English countries. This book is set in Nigeria. So those are the two prompts that Stay With Me will go towards. Next, the Dream Hotel. I'm going to use this for the A to Z challenge for D, and for the cover rainbow challenge for a purple cover. And then next, The Husbands, I'm using this again for the A to Z challenge for H, and again for the cover rainbow challenge for yellow. So 2 more books added for those 2 there. And then Yesteryear, again, using it A to Z for Y, and then also for the by the hundreds page count, I'm using it for the 300 to 399 slot for that challenge. So I've made some pretty good progress so far there. And yeah, that's my update on all my challenges if you care about that. But yeah, that's all I have for today's video. That's everything that I read in April and May. And I'm already reading some really great books in June, so I'm excited to update you again. I will probably be updating you at the end of June because I am heavily considering participating in Herkyed 3.0, which I'm not even going to get into that right now. I'll link a video. If you have no idea what I'm talking about and you want to learn more, you can watch the video that I link in my description. But I think I'm going to make a whole separate video about that and plans for that. I don't know. I'm still thinking about it. But anyways, that's all I have for today. That's everything I read in April and May. And let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. Let me know what your favorite read from April or May was, or if you've read anything great lately. If you have any recommendations for me, I'd love to hear them. And if you wouldn't mind liking or even subscribing, I would really, really appreciate it. But until next time, let's chat in the comments. Bye.